Berman's final chapter in All That Is Solid Melts into Air dwells a lot on the question of the destruction of community by modernization. He doesn't celebrate this fact, obviously, but he doesn't straightforwardly long for a lost past. In fact, for those familiar with the book and with Berman's work, I mean, it's very much about trying to rescue this dialectical approach to modernity and to capitalism, understanding it as the best and worst thing that has ever happened. In fact, Berman, by focusing on Robert Moses's act of driving a motorway through Bronx neighborhoods, he notes that this was the destruction of beautiful modernity by modernity itself. This was a kind of great tragedy. That places in a sort of ambivalent situation. So I wanted to ask, reflecting on this reading where he discusses in a very personal way as well, the way that Robert Moses destroyed his neighborhood, whether we encounter, what kind of forms of top-down modernization do we encounter today? And I imagine that your answers in London will be different from mine in Sao Paulo. But anyway.
Well, what will your answer be in Sao Paulo? Because I think my answer in London is fairly short. Like the top-down modernization, the kind of this picture of Moses, which Berman paints really nicely, of like this guy who's like the master of these public works programs, moving money around, keeping the system in constant building motion. It's always got to be kind of something new coming
fabulous.
up. That doesn't exist here. I mean, if it does exist, then I've fucking missed it. But I'm pretty sure that
all it is
nothing.
those skanky kind of skyscrapers that are run by Qatari, kind of investment funds and owned by kind of, BlackRock or whatever, tiny little rabbit hutches stacked, all the way high. That's Sadiq Khan's London, but it's nothing like the ruthless visionary of Robert Moses.
Milan ou Tripoli, Vilnius ou Benghazi, Paris, Moscou, on fait le bunga, bunga, Bangkok ou Bogota, Le Caire ou Jakarta, Gustavia, on fait le bunga, bunga, Stockholm ou Monaco, ou Montevideo, Oslo, Tokyo, on fait le bunga, bunga.
Hello from a very bunged up Alex Hochuli, but you'll be relieved to know, still bunged up. This is the BungaCast Reading Club with Philip Cunliffe and George Hoare in England. Hello.
Hi, that was so lame. Such a lame start, Alex. I liked it. To ask that you re-record it, but
no. But anyway, you'll have to bear with my somewhat nasal voice for the rest of the day, and indeed for the rest of mine and your lives. This is the Reading Club. We are launching the new BungaCast 2024-25 syllabus. Very excited to be doing it. The big themes that we've identified to look at through the Reading Club, but which also informs the rest of our programming, is around place, nation, and class. You can read more about that in the syllabus. It's a PDF. You can click on it. It's in the show notes in here. And I'm going to talk about what we're going to be discussing for this quadrimester. As I'm informed it is. It's a 4-month stint in which we're discussing the future of place.
Is that how they refer to it on the Italic Peninsula, the quadrimester?
I don't know. Yeah, potentially. I'll have to ask the Etruscans and their successors. So let me introduce by quoting from the thing that I wrote itself. Place seems increasingly redundant, overcome by globalization, digitalization, cosmopolitanism, postmodernity. Cities are increasingly composed of identityless or historyless non-places. We surely require spaces where people can gather, public squares or third places like bars and cafes, but does place necessarily imply rootedness or authenticity? What's the role of place in the generation of sociability and indeed in political action? So that's what we're going to be exploring today and through the course of the next 4 months. And indeed, in some ways, across the whole of the 2024-25 syllabus, we're interested, I guess, in looking at the world at the end of globalization. I mean, this is something that we've been doing from the start of this podcast anyway, but maybe we're bringing some of those elements to the surface with regard to nation, with regard to class, and also here with regard to space, place, cities, which have been quite radically transformed, actually, if you think about it, over the past 30, 40 years, in terms of the expulsion of people from the city center, making cities kind of unaffordable, rising rents, all the rest of it. And so we're going to try to discuss some of the political and social consequences of that. So Marshall Berman's "All That Is Solid Melts into Air: The Experience of Modernity," which is one of the two readings that we're discussing here. This book from 1982 was begun probably sometime in the 1970s, reflecting on the history of modernity as a light that turned from green to red. I mean, this is an imagery that he uses in the chapter that we're discussing, from go to stop, you can't, reflecting really on the end of the post-war boom, the 1970s, an age of austerity, an age of limits, and really a consciousness of limits at that time, and what that meant for modernization and for modernism, which, as we will come to find out, he notes that they've gone separate ways as he's writing this in the late 70s, early 80s. Modernization and modernism no longer work in tandem. So this has also appeared when people were talking about postmodernism, right? So they were already getting a sense of reflecting on a modernism which was in the past, which is a situation that we still live with. So let me just cite from this concluding chapter that we're going to be discussing, which is the 5th chapter. To be modern, I said, is to experience personal and social life as a maelstrom, to find one's world and oneself in perpetual disintegration and renewal, trouble and anguish, ambiguity and contradiction. To be part of a universe in which all that is solid melts into air. To be a modernist is to make oneself somehow at home in the maelstrom, to make its rhythms one's own, to move within its currents in search of the forms of reality, of beauty, of freedom, of justice, that its fervid and perilous flow allows. Great prose as usual from Berman. Are we at home in the maelstrom? The maelstrom is also the topic of the other reading that we're going to be discussing, which we're going to come to actually before the Berman. But as a way of introduction, I think it's worth asking these questions, which I think frame the whole section here that we're doing over the next months. Of how thrown, if the experience of modernity is a sense of thrownness, of being thrown into the world, how thrown is too thrown? What if we lack a common environmental reference, common reference to place, a common place to work from? So Berman warns that, or rather he warns of a modernism that throws off its scraps and tatters and the uneasy joints that bind it to the past. This would be a modernism that had lost all its weight and depth, and the maelstrom of modern life would carry it helplessly away. So, what happens when modernity eats itself? Just to quote another little passage here from the end. I believe that we and those who come after us will go on fighting to make ourselves at home in this world, even as the homes we have made, the modern street, the modern spirit, go on melting into air. It's brilliant. I mean, this is one of my favorite books ever, I have to admit. And the prose is brilliant. And I think that also just really sets up what we want to discuss over the next months. So the other work, as I've mentioned, is Georg Simmel's essay, Metropolis and Mental Life from 1903, written towards the end of the long 19th century as cities boomed across Europe. And it was originally provided as one of a series of lectures on all aspects of city life by experts in various fields. So, science, religion, art, really across the board, not hamstrung by the disciplinary constraints of today. And the series was also conducted alongside the Dresden Cities exhibition of 1903. So here we're concerned with modernity and the metropolis and the maelstrom, conflicts between individual and society, between community and cosmopolitanism, between mobility, that is mobility both social and geographic, and rootedness. As I have hinted at, the following sessions in this first theme will kind of try to look at this same question from different angles. So the next one, which will be in December, will deal with the post or hypermodern development of non-places. Basically, this idea of greater and greater areas of the city becoming akin to airport departure areas, kind of characterless, historyless, controlled. The third session at the start of the year in January will deal with community and the walling off of community and what it means for public life. And that's, again, a reading from some nearly 50 years ago. So it'll be interesting to reflect on what's changed, if those were especially forward-looking, perspicacious words written back then, or if if they've been somehow overtaken by history. And we'll conclude with David Harvey's book on the condition of postmodernity, a major section of that book anyway, which deals with the compression of space, globalization, and postmodernity. And that one will be live.
Hi there, friends. This is the end of a sample from an episode available only to subscribers at patreon.com/bungacast. For $7 a month, subscribers get at least 4 original exclusive episodes a month, featuring Alex, George, and Phil, as well as our regular contributors, Alex Gurovich, Amberly Frost, Catherine New, and Lee Phillips. We've got episodes on current affairs, extended interviews, exclusive episodes on theory, history, culture, docuseries, analyses of film, and our responses to listeners' questions and criticisms. And for $12 a month, you also get access to the very special BungaCast Reading Club, where we present the key books and essays necessary for understanding the world today, how we got here, and where we might be going. Of course, if you just want to try us out, there's also a $3 entry tier giving you 1 exclusive episode a month. We do hope you'll join us. These are turbulent times, and ideologically confused ones as well. We tried to find some political clarity so that we might move beyond the age of bunga bunga.
Dakar ou Brasilia, go